Thank you very much, Astis, and very good morning and welcome to all of you here from the EFTA House. It is a great pleasure to see so many of you here today in the room, and it also is very nice to know that so many are joining online for this event. So, my name is Siri Veseth Meling, and I'm responsible for overseeing the work of the Secretariat with the EEA agreement here in Brussels. So, in the following, I will give you first a brief introduction to the Secretariat and its work here in Brussels, and then an introduction to the EEA agreement, its objectives, scope, and institutional setup. But as you have seen, there will be many more speakers later on today that will elaborate on these various topics as well. So, first, the EFTA Secretariat. We have 3 offices. The headquarters are in Geneva, dealing mainly with free trade negotiations and administering of free trade agreements, and the EFTA Council. Then we have our statistical office in Luxembourg, and our office here in Brussels, which is the largest, deals with the EEA agreement. And for those of you not present here in the room today, you see on the screen a photo of the EFTA House, where we now reside since 2021 with our sister organizations, the EFTA Surveillance Authority and the FMO, Financial Mechanism Office. So, our main task here is to support the EEA EFTA states in their work with the EEA agreement, and in particular related to new legislation. And this can be a lengthy process. We follow new legislation from the proposal stage in the EU until incorporation into the EEA agreement via a joint committee decision. So we contribute both in the decision-shaping phase and also the decision-making process. And the Secretariat has therefore a coordinating role both among the EEA EFTA states, informing the positions, etc., and then vis-à-vis the Commission with the EFTA states. And you will hear more about this from my colleague Marit in a moment. We also serve as a Secretariat for EFTA's advisory bodies, EFTA Consultative Committee, EFTA Parliamentary Committee, and the EEA EFTA Forum. And these bring together parliamentarians and the social partners. So, I will then turn to the EEA agreement. And as you know, the European Economic Area was established with the EEA agreement, which entered into force in 1994. It extends the internal market of the EU to the EEA EFTA states, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. And it creates one single market with common rules and equal conditions of competition. So, the agreement relies on 2 main and important principles that I'd like to highlight here. And as you see on the screen, this is taking the text from the preamble of the EEA agreement. And firstly, it is dynamic, which means that the new relevant EU legislation is continuously incorporated into the EEA agreement. And this requires a proper decision-making mechanism on the EEA side. And secondly, it is homogeneous, meaning that there need to be common rules, and also they should need to be applied and enforced in the same manner throughout the whole EEA. And this requires a proper enforcement mechanism. And I will show how this is reflected in the institutional setup of the EEA agreement in a moment. But before that, I will briefly visit the material scope of the EEA agreement. So, as mentioned, the EEA agreement creates a single internal market. And this means that all relevant legislation in the EU is to be incorporated into the EEA agreement, so that it applies throughout the whole of the EEA. And the core of this is the free movement of goods, services, capital, and persons, usually called the 4 freedoms. And in addition, the EEA covers horizontal policies supporting the EEA internal market, and its functioning, such as environment, social policy, consumer protection, statistics, and company law. And in order to ensure conditions of equal competition conditions throughout the EEA, it is also important to have the common rules on state aid, competition, and public procurement. And these agreements are mirrored from the ones in the EU. It also provides for participation in EU programs, which is important. Such as, for instance, research and development, education, and the Erasmus program is one well-known program that has been successful in that respect. The agreement also contributes to reduce social and economical disparities in Europe by the European grants, and you will hear more about this later today from the FMO. So as you will see, these are the core of the EEA agreement, but there are also important areas that are not covered by the EEA, which is important to have in mind, namely the EU Common Agriculture and Fisheries Policies, the Customs Union, Common Trade Policy, Common Foreign Security and Defense Policy, Justice and Home Affairs, taxation, and the Economic and Monetary Union. So, in order to understand the institutional setup of the EEA agreement, is it important to have in mind that different models of cooperation are, you may find different models of cooperation in EFTA and the EU. While on the one side you see in the EU model, you have supranational organization, meaning that member states have transferred competence to certain institutions in specific policy areas. While on the EFTA side, there is no such transfer of competence or power. It is a traditional intergovernmental cooperation between the governments of the EFTA states. And as regards decisions, on the EU side, we have binding decisions. There are for the member states taken by dedicated institutions on the EU side according to quite detailed procedures. While on the EFTA side, there is also the principle of consensus among the governments of the EFTA states. And while it, on the EU side, is important to preserve the decision-making autonomy of the EU, it is, on the EFTA side, a major concern to preserve the national sovereignty. And this is why the EEA agreement is based on the so-called two-pillar structure, which was invented for this agreement specifically on the basis of this background. And here you will see on the left side, you will see what we call the EFTA pillar. On the right side, you will see the EU pillar. And in the middle, we have some common EEA bodies. So, a few words first on the EEA common bodies. You have the EEA Council, which is the highest governing body in the EEA, and where the EEA EFTA states and the EU meet at political level twice a year in order to discuss political developments in the EEA. And then you have the Eea Joint Committee, which is the operational body of the EEA agreement, and that is where the parties meet in order to incorporate and agree on legislation to be taken into the EEA agreement. And here the EEA EFTA states meet at ambassador level and meet with their counterparts in the Commission. And then we have, on the EFTA side there, we have the Standing Committee, as you will see, number 2 from top. That is the highest governing body of EFTA, where the EFTA ambassadors meet and form positions ahead of meeting their counterparts in the Eea Joint Committee. But before reaching both the Eea Joint Committee and the Standing Committee, there's normally been a long process involved in both pillars, but in the EFTA pillar involving working groups, various subcommittees, formed under the Standing Committee. And this you will also learn more about later today. And then we have the Eea Joint Parliamentary Committee and the Eea Consultative Committee, bringing together the parliamentarians of the parties and the social partners. And then in the middle, you can see what is relating to the enforcement on implementation of the Eea agreement. We have in the EFTA pillar, we have the EFTA Surveillance Authority and the EFTA Court, ensuring enforcement for the EFTA states. And then we have on the other side the European Commission and the Court of Justice dealing with this in the EU pillar. So as you will see, this is also handled within the two respective pillars. And you will also meet and hear more about these bodies later today, so I will not go further into any details now. It's worth noting that the setup of the Eea agreement has remained unchanged since its entry into force. And while on the other side, the EU has changed. It has developed with respect to the forms of cooperation and new competences. For instance, the establishment of numerous agencies, and with some with the decision-making power, and this has caused certain challenges because this was not foreseen in the setup of the Eea agreement. So this has called for the need to find solutions in order to find workable ways of solving participation for also the Eea EFTA states, while kind of bearing in mind the two-pillar structure and the important principles of the agreement. But we have found solutions, and the agreement and its institutional setup has so proven to be resilient, robust, flexible over time, enabling the parties and the agreement to adapt to new developments and finding workable solutions. And the Eea agreement is approaching its 30th anniversary in 2024. And although a bit dated now, I will nevertheless round off my presentation with this latest family photo from the summit and the 25th year anniversary, where you can see the heads of EU states and the Eea EFTA prime ministers at the time, marking the anniversary. And I believe this is a nice illustration of the parties' shared commitment to this agreement, the special relationship between the Eea EFTA states and the EU, and also the importance of this agreement and cooperation. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention.